I mean, it's one thing to sit on realestate.com and look at all the new units for sale or look at all the big sites for sale with all the development potential that the agent's writing about. It's another thing to actually get out there and look at the development going up on a site and then look at the site 5 doors down that, could potentially do the same thing, and getting out there and getting a real feel for what's going on in the area.
You are listening to the Property Developer Podcast, your home for tips, ideas and inspiration to help take your developing to the next level. Now here's your host, Justin Getty.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Property Developer Podcast, a show dedicated to helping property developers take their game to the next level. Before I get started with today's guest, I thought I would do a quick project update on our townhouse development. This week we were all set to begin construction and have the Boar Pier retaining wall put in along our eastern boundary. Everyone was booked in and ready to go, which took a bit of juggling I might add. And today I found out that the set-out guy can't find the boundary pegs that were put in when we had the boundary re-establishment survey done. So they can't set out the boundary, which means the retaining wall can't go in later this week. Of course, being the end of the year, the surveyor who did the job says they can't get out there for about a month. So at the moment I'm trying to find a solution so that things can still get done this week. Anyway, I'm sure we'll find a way around it so the retaining wall can still go in. It's just another bump along the developing road. On to today's guest, who is Daniel Hamilton. Daniel is a plumber by trade and runs his own plumbing business, servicing developers of mid to large projects. So he really understands the developing process and what it is like on the trade side. Daniel started out doing a 4-unit site and is currently trying to get approval for a 20-plus apartment block. In this chat we talk about why Daniel is moving into higher density developments, what he has learned along the way, and one thing he does for developing inspiration and ideas. My first question to Daniel was, if he could be a member of any band in the past 20 years, who would it be and why?
I could have been in any band in the last 20 years. Yep, it would have been a band called Jars of Clay. I'm a Christian, and Jars of Clay is one of my favourite Christian bands, and I really like their work and what they do. And they have an amazing acoustic sound. I play acoustic guitar, and I love their music.
Oh, very good. I would have had you down as maybe a Kiss fan.
Really? Yeah, no. Kiss is not on my list. There you go. There's a Hall & Oates track for you.
All right, very good. Well, it's always good to know a little bit about someone and their musical tastes.
There you go.
So can you tell us a little bit about your developing journey, things that you're working on, projects that you've completed?
Started out about 3 or 4 years ago now. Our first site was a site we put 4 units on in Croydon in Melbourne. Yeah, so we purchased that at the towards the end of 2012. Yeah, went through the developing process, went through the application process, ended up getting 4 units on. That all finished up in February this year. So that was my first project, mine and my business partner's project. That was our first one. So yeah, it went quite well.
So was that a 4-unit site on 1,000 square metres?
It was a 4-unit site on 1110.
Okay. Daniel, can you tell us how you got into property developing and why?
Yeah, so I run my own plumbing business called Fresh Plumbing and Air Conditioning, and we specialise in building of new townhouses, new unit sites, doing the plumbing side of that, apartment sites. Yeah, sort of your mid-size to larger residential builds. Yeah, so that's what we do in the plumbing side of things. I love what I do. I love the work, and I just was looking for something else to be doing alongside that. Really, maybe something that could provide me a bit of a better financial future in a shorter time frame than what plumbing will or would have taken. I started looking around. I did a few business courses, spoke to a lot of people, and I've always worked around sites, unit sites, townhouse sites, apartment sites. So I knew that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be the one doing the developing side of it. That's sort of what led me into it.
So would you say that given your trade background, that gave you a little bit of a leg up or a bit of an insight into what developing is actually like?
Yes, would be the answer to that. I do feel that the trade background helped, because in developing, it just allowed me to be a step ahead in knowing what in having some idea of already of what happens actually on site. Especially in plumbing, there's a lot to do there's a bit to do in developing with drainage and pipe work. I suppose authority services and knowing, they can be learnt as part of the developing process. But the trade background did give me a bit of a leg up there, yeah.
And it meant you also had a hard hat, high-vis vest and boots if you needed to make a site visit.
That's right. That's one cost I did not have to factor into the developing spreadsheet.
And then tell us a little bit about what you're working on at the moment, because you've got a couple of interesting sites on the go.
Yeah, so currently we have 2 sites on the go at the moment, out in the east of Melbourne, the same sort of area as we did our first one. They're a bit bigger than the first one, so we're working on one site at the moment. It's 22 apartments. So we're just going through the planning process at the moment with council. So that's one of them, and the other one is another apartment site. We haven't begun the planning process with that yet. We're just sitting that one there at the moment while we just work out what the first one's doing. But they're the 2 current projects.
Okay, that's interesting. And I understand that the planning application process for your first apartment building is providing a learning experience for you, shall we say?
Yeah, well, I think the whole developing journey is a bit of a learning experience. So where we're at, we've submitted our initial application to council, and they've come back and asked for some amendments to the site without being incredibly direct about what they want to see. So we've had to get some consultants involved to, I suppose, have a bit of a redesign. We've got an urban designer involved now, so to get a redesign from a neighbourhood character streetscape sort of angle. And so we're hoping that with the redesign of the site, this will go back to council, and they'll be happy to move forward with it.
Okay, and what lessons would you say that you've learnt in that encounter with council in terms of what you would do differently next time?
Yeah, next time I would be involving these professionals earlier. I'd be putting my hand in my pocket to start with and getting some really good people on side, probably even prior to going to a designer. Initially, I'd be getting some, maybe a town planner, an urban designer, and maybe a landscape designer to have a look at the site itself, to have a look at the height and the setback restrictions, and to give some indication as to what might fit in the area, but also what might be supported through a legal process, through VCAT if required at the other end of the application, if it did go through to council and it wasn't supported, or if the residents or those surrounding the property stuck their heels in and took us to VCAT or something.
So have you got any advice for people about how you approach working with council on a contentious design?
I think it largely, from my understanding, it depends on what council it is, and I suppose that the planners you're dealing with in that council. Some councils will give you clear direction as to what they want to see on a particular block of land, and you can move away fairly confidently and go and get something designed to that. Some councils, such as Yarra Ranges, which is the council we're dealing with, provide much less direction as to what they might like to see on a site, in my experience anyway. It's a bit hit and miss, to be honest, I think, depending on who you get at the council. I don't think there's any surety dealing with a council.
Okay, so do you seek clarification from the planners wherever you can, or do you rely more heavily upon your consultants?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think certainly it's a good idea to involve the planners at council if they're willing to have an opinion on the site. On our particular site at the moment, they haven't, as I said earlier, they haven't been too clear on direction. So I've had to rely very heavily on my consultants and bring some new consultants in along the way to provide that direction. Yeah.
Okay. But you're confident that you'll either get council support or you can take it all the way through to a tribunal and be successful?
I'm now confident, with having brought these new consultants on, that if it doesn't get supported at council with our resubmission.
And so what is it about the advice that you've gotten from these consultants that gives you that confidence?
Well, these consultants deal in the tribunal regularly, on projects of this size, of this nature, in quite a few different areas, different councils, and so their advice is current with what they're experiencing, with councils and also with the tribunal. So, in my way of thinking, they're the best ones to rely on moving forward, they're the ones with the experience in the area.
Okay, so your advice to others is get these people on board early if you're uncertain about how council will view it, or just get them on regardless?
Yeah, I think it largely depends on what you're doing on the site. I think if you're building something that's fairly common in the area, that you could probably go without having to have these consultants on site. But I think if you're pushing the boundaries and building something a little bit larger, maybe being a bit of a forerunner, that it's definitely a good idea to get these consultants in to start with, so that you can be confident in your initial design with your initial application, and it'll just save time in moving forward if in fact it does have to go through to a tribunal level.
So can you tell me why you decided to move from a 4-unit site up to an apartment block?
A couple of reasons. I have, in my current line of work in the plumbing, we do a lot of apartment-style jobs. So for me personally, that's always where I've wanted to be. I've wanted to be doing bigger jobs since the beginning. So I've probably taken the step a bit earlier than others may have, but that's probably because I've always wanted to be there doing it, and I've seen them done before as well. So I have some idea of the areas and sort of the yield in regards to the number of units or apartments you can get on a certain size site in a certain size zoning. So I have some experience in that. And secondly, the profit on a 22 apartment site versus the profit on a 4 apartment site is just that much better. While it can take a significantly longer time to get the application through and the build process is significantly longer, it's the return at the end of the project is a better return.
Okay, that's good. Well, it'll be interesting to see how you go with council and if you can get that one off the ground.
It will be very interesting. Watch this space.
So can you tell me, what have you learnt about developing over the past couple of years that you've been involved with it?
I think once you know that what you want to do in developing, and you learn, that type of developing, whether it be townhouses or apartments, or once you learn the process of how to do it, it's really just copy and paste. It's like learning anything new. You put your best effort towards it. You put in the time learning it. And, it's a new skill. It's a new skill for life. And so I suppose I've learnt that developing really is where I want to be for moving forward for my, my chosen career, I suppose, or my chosen way of creating wealth.
And what do you reckon you've learned about yourself along the way?
I suppose I've learnt having run my own business for a lot of years. I knew that I was capable of getting this off the ground, or getting something new off the ground. And so I suppose I've confirmed that in myself. It's highlighted some strengths and some weaknesses in myself throughout the developing process. I suppose that, like in anything, you can get developing is a bit of an up and down journey. You'll have wins one day, you'll have losses the next day, as far as things going right, things being challenging, and through some of the challenging times, you can slow down. You can become, you can procrastinate on doing the difficult parts of the process, or even sometimes the mundane parts of the process. I suppose I've just learnt to keep my head up and just push through. If you're able to do that, then you will get to the end eventually. And if you're able to stick to the goal, you'll come out the other end winning. Yeah,
I reckon you're right. I've had a day like that just today, with some wins, some losses. Not necessarily financial, but just little wins, little losses here and there.
That's right. Yeah. So that's a normal day in developing.
Yeah, developing is never in a straight line, is it?
No, it's like anything in life. It is a zigzag. Life is a zigzag, and you've got to make sure that doesn't get to you, because that's just life. It's never ever going to go all your own way all the time. But if you keep at it, persist, you do eventually get the outcome you wanted.
So do you reckon that's the key skill for a developer, is persistence, or is there something else to it?
I think the key skill for a developer is confidence. I would say that it's not being a know-all, because as soon as you know it, you will not learn it. So you need to be humble. You need to be malleable, as in you need to be able to learn new things and take on board new ways of doing things. You need to understand the process. You need to be all over knowing what you're doing. But the key is confidence. For me, that's what I feel is the key for developing or for business, to be honest. So you just need to know that, hey, you're out there, you're doing it, you're giving it a go. Be confident in moving forward. Get the right advice and just do it. Just hold your head up. Go out the next day. Go out that day. Do what you need to do. Obviously, persistence is part of that, but no, the key is confidence in yourself is what it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting, because I've often heard that money flows to confidence.
There's one thing, Justin, it's confidence. That's the one thing you need.
All right. I'll make sure that I keep working on that. You can write a book, The One Thing You Need in Developing. And so, can you tell me what it is you love about developing?
In my current business, to gain the same return off a project, or even a much greater return, depending on what project you're doing, where you're doing it, it takes a lot less time and effort to return the same amount of money, or the same amount of return on investment in developing than it does in what I was currently doing in running my own business. And so that is definitely one aspect I love about developing: the freedom to choose when you do what. And if you're planning and developing your own site, you really are steering the ship. And I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on you to make sure you keep things moving, but you are calling the shots in that. Whereas working for someone else or running your own business, working for other people, you are still on their time frame. You are still working to their deadlines. So it's just much more comfortable to be running the show from a point of view of running your own development.
Yeah, you can certainly leverage your time pretty significantly when you're doing developments.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you had a magic wand and could change anything about developing, what would it be?
It would be the application process and the approval process through council. It seems to me that is the one of the unknowns, I suppose, that you can't really control throughout the developing process, is exactly what you're going to come up against at council. So the framework in which we are able to put certain size properties on certain sites in certain zones, and then there's an opinion level really at council, where it depends on which planning you get at what time, and what their outlook is, and they are elected by the residents and by the constituents in that area. So they can be very heavily influenced by external factors other than what the state government has decided. That would be the right thing to put on that block. So I would, if I could wave a magic wand and change anything, it would be that process. That it would be more reliable information and clear cut requirements that would say, right, if you do this on this site, you will be approved. Because I think developers would be quite happy to stick to those guidelines if they were made available. Now, in a way, they are made available, but then you can hit that next level of red tape where you've got an elected person making the decision, and generally they're not going to side with the big bad developer. They're going to side with the residents who are voting them in for their job for next year. So I just think that process could be a little bit easier for everyone.
Yes, I would certainly be in favour of a more streamlined approval process, that's for sure. Some of it is just people bringing their personal views to the table rather than ticking boxes. Does it meet design? Does it meet the schedule? Does it meet the planning code? Tick, tick, tick. Yep.
That's exactly right, and that's what that is. That's what those things are in place for that you've mentioned. They're in there to guide developers and those who would want to build housing for people to follow. But yes, that's right. personal views certainly come into it.
And so tell me, do you plan ahead at all? Do you sort of have a 3 to 5 year plan, or next year, 2 years, in terms of what kind of projects you'd like to work on?
My 5-year plan is to finish these 2 projects off that we've got on the go now, and that should be done within the 5 years. And along the way, assessing where we would be. I mean, we will be on the outlook for one more site within that time, possibly 2. But just assessing how these ones are running, and certainly moving on with this size project, whether it be in the same location or maybe a location a bit closer to the city. Once the capital is available to buy in, that would be my plan moving forward, and eventually to do developing full time.
Now, looking ahead with your apartment project, once you get through this approval stage or the approval stage, what do you think is going to be the hardest part or some of the more challenging aspects to it?
Well, once we're approved, I do see it running fairly smoothly from there. I suppose I have the benefit of having been involved in a number of these projects from a trade level and seeing them right through from beginning to end. So I have a good understanding of how that will all work. Also, an understanding of the services and authorities and I suppose the different trades and authorities that need to be involved in the building of the project. One of the challenges on our current site may be the digging of the basement, but that'll be sorted through a discussion process with the builder we end up deciding to go with. We have done some soil tests on the site. There potentially is some rock where we will be requiring to dig the basement out. So that's probably the only unknown for me once the approval is granted.
Oh, well, hopefully it turns out to be a pretty smooth process for you.
Absolutely. Let's hope.
Yeah, I certainly know after we got the approval on our townhouse development, I thought it would be plain sailing. And it was anything but.
Yeah, well, yes, there's always challenges. But were those things, the challenges that have come after approval, were they unknowns to you, or were they just more of a process of working through each item just to get the result?
Yeah, I think you're going to come up against challenges when you're doing larger developments. It just doesn't matter what they are, and you just have to work through them. Nothing that's that big is going to be a smooth process. So
yeah, and I think once you've got your approval in place, while the challenges that present themselves are certainly on the day they present are certainly they do knock you over sometimes. Most of them can be worked through with the right people.
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest frustrations is just that you regularly come up against people who are saying no, or it can't be done, or it needs to be done differently. And sometimes that can get a bit frustrating and it slows you down.
Yeah, yep. That's true.
Until you figure out a way to go around them or to get around it.
Yeah, and quite often it's as hard as it is, and I struggle with this, but it's listening to what's going on for that person as well. Like, why are they telling me this won't work? Is it because they are having a bad day and the missus yelled at them this morning and they can't be bothered, or is it actually is this actually something that will not work? Is it it's just about listening and working out what needs to happen around it to find a solution, find a different way. There's big issues and then there's smaller issues, and I suppose your big ticket items are your sales prices, your build cost, your obviously your purchase price of the site, your sales price of your end product, your build cost along the way. Once and your approval from council. Once you've got those key things sorted, then everything else really should be able to be worked out. If you need to bring a wall in here, or move a pipe over there, or move the location of the fire service meter, or whatever it is. Move the location of the 44 bins you've got to put in to service the site. And lose a car park. Well, these are small issues. That can be worked through.
I can't imagine the number of decisions I've had to make since before buying the site to now. Be in the thousands easily.
Well, it's never boring, is it, Justin?
No, it's never been boring, and that's actually something that I really like about developing.
Yes, it's
we've
keeping the mind ticking.
We also have to provide space for 44 bins out the front of our place. It doesn't take up any car spaces, fortunately.
No, not on yours. You've got quite a lot of room on that site. Maybe it could have been 50.
Yeah, well, I was pleased. I actually wrote the waste management plan as part of the application. I was very pleased when it got ticked off by Council's waste department.
There you go. Do you think that maybe that could be a side venture?
Well, I might make it available for people to use. It was pretty straightforward.
I might grab the template off you.
Yeah. The essence of the document was that the owners would take the bins from their garages on bin day, wheel them to the front, leave them there, and once they were emptied, they would wheel them back and put them in their garages.
That's well thought out. I don't know where you got that idea.
Well, the guys in the waste area liked it enough to approve it.
Because it rang true. That's what they do as well.
And I think I put a nice photo of some wheelie bins on the front of it.
See, now it's all about the artistic flair. That's what it is. That's what got you through.
And so for the developers out there that are listening to you, what one thing do you find that works really well for you?
One thing that works really well for me is getting in my car and going for a drive around and seeing what's going on in an area, and then speaking to some agents in the area, maybe ringing the builder on a site that you might drive past and see what's going on. You know, even talking to the council in a specific area, but getting an understanding of the developing that's going on in that area and what is being achieved and how that happened, and then how you could, you know, if that's an area you want to do something in, how you could then replicate that in your own developing. That's something that works quite well for me. I mean, it's one thing to sit on realestate.com and look at all the new units for sale, or look at all the big sites for sale with all the development potential that the agent's writing about. It's another thing to actually get out there and look at the development going up on a site, and then look at the site 5 doors down that, you know, could potentially do the same thing, and getting out there and getting a real feel for what's going on in the area. I mean, that nothing spurs me on like getting out and doing that. And that would be one thing that works very well for me.
Well, I think that's terrific advice, Daniel, and I reckon that's a pretty good place for us to finish up here. So, Daniel, thanks for being on the Property Developer Podcast. I'm very grateful for all the information that you've shared with us. If there's any developers out there that want help with their plumbing on their next project, they can certainly contact you at Fresh Plumbing and Air Conditioning, and I'm sure you've got an email address that they can get you at.
Yeah, definitely. They can just flick me an email over to daniel@freshplumbing.com.au. They can get in touch with me that way.
Daniel, thanks again for being on the Property Developer Podcast.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was another great chat with a developer with an eye on bigger things. I like how Daniel has a clear idea of where he is going with his developing and the types of projects he wants to get into. I took a couple of things away from our conversation. First, get clear on what type of projects you want to get into and figure out a path on how to get there. Do you need to take some small steps to get there, or can you find a mentor to help show you the way? Can you do a smaller project of that type to get some experience and learn the ropes before jumping onto something bigger? Second, if you're looking to test the boundaries with the local council, then invest in getting good consultants onto the project early. Having that support and confidence as you go into the approval process will help you sleep better at night and also show council you are serious about your proposal. And third, take a drive around the area you want to develop in and see what's going on. It will show you what has received approval and what is on the market. Not that that necessarily means it is a profitable or successful project, but it will give you an idea of what's possible. You can then do some further investigation on those projects to find out how they got the approval. Did they have to go to a tribunal? Who is the builder? Can you give them a call and find out a bit about the project? Who's the listing agent? Can you call them and see how the properties are being received by the market? So there's plenty of good inspiration and intelligence that you can gather from one trip around the area. That's it for another episode. Please leave a comment with iTunes if you're enjoying the show, or head over to propertydeveloperpodcast.com and leave a comment on the bottom of the page for this episode. I'll respond to each of them. That's it. Until next time, may all your developments be successful.
You've been listening to the Property Developer Podcast. Tune in next time for more tips, ideas and inspiration to take your developing to the next level. For more developing love, make sure to visit propertydeveloperpodcast.com.